Hello, hello, hello. Oh, wow. So it's like the usual crew. Hi, the Mastermind and Invisible Borderline and Rayanne. It's good to see you. The Mastermind, I did get your questions, but they have disappeared as soon as I went live. So can you ask them again? That would be really helpful. And how is everyone? And happy Christmas. What are you guys doing for the holidays? Do you celebrate? Where are you in the world? What are you guys up to? I'd love to know. Invisible Borderline, hopefully you can see me now. Guys, can you let me know if you do see me? Because sometimes I sometimes I mess up the tech. And I can't. And last time I did a live, I was talking for a good 5 minutes to absolutely no one, because I hadn't managed to hit the live button, but I think I am live. So yeah, good to see you guys. So yeah, that Mastermind, ask your questions again. So Rayanne, thank you. Yes, good. This is good to know. Sound is good. Picture is good. We're all good. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Hooray. Because it doesn't always work. So Invisible Borderline, you're getting nothing. That's really strange. Oh, it's working now. Good. Good. And I saw you are like the first person who's ever remixed me in a video. So thank you for doing that. It's nice that it was such a nice one. I think it was the interview on Jacob, the Nameless Narcissist channel. And that was really cool. That was really cool. Thank you so much for doing that. If you guys haven't seen it, Invisible Borderline made a little remix of bit of an interview I did. So check out her channel. I think it's on one of the shorts. So do see it. So, Invisible Borderline, great question. Can you talk about strategies to combat magical thinking? It's Christmas. Why do you want to combat magical thinking? We all want a little magic. But give me some suggestions. What kind of magical thinking do you want to combat, and why? What are the costs of the magical thinking? Why is it a problem? That's what I'd like to know, and I'd be very happy to answer that question. But I'm guessing with magical thinking, maybe you're thinking about thinking that's not entirely realistic, thinking about maybe almost like a fantasy, like if I, I'm thinking about examples that from my kind of the work that I do with people, maybe the kind of false hope, like this relationship can improve. And or if I just do this, then I will earn. So you're thinking about past. So this relationship was really, really amazing. This person was so special to me, and a kind of euphoric thinking back to the things that maybe you missed that were very special in the relationship. So maybe very happy memories, maybe aspects from the start of the relationship when things were really good. Maybe you were in a love bombing stage, or the kind of honeymoon stage. And I think this is something that's quite typical after you break up, when you're going through the grieving process and losing the relationship. You know how, like, any of us, when we lose someone through a death or bereavement, you don't speak ill of the dead, right? You remember the good things. You remember the things that you liked and appreciated. And when you're lonely, when you're feeling the loss of the relationship, it's quite easy to tip into idealizing the past relationship and the things that you didn't like about them, or the things that you did like about them, or the hopes and the dreams that you had for the relationship. So in order to combat that, you need a bit of a reality check. So what I suggest to people is they sit down and they just write down a list of all the things that you didn't like about the relationships, the reason that you have ended the relationship, or if you're thinking about ending a relationship because deep down inside you know it's really not a good relationship to be in, but you have that kind of euphoric fantasy, or recalling the past when things were maybe much better, when it was at the start of the relationship and everything was rosy and maybe everything was a bit idealized for you and for the other person. um, I, I would really think about the reality of the relationship and write down the things you didn't like. With some people, I'll call it the shit list. You're going to make a list of all the things that made this relationship really crappy for you, whatever they may be. Write them down, put them somewhere accessible. And when you find yourself in that kind of longing, and euphoric recall, put the reality in front of your face. Other things you can do that might be quite helpful with that is if you have good friends or family members or people um, who knew you and knew the relationship well, ask them to remind you of all the things that were really, really bad about the relationship, because it's remarkable. I see it all the time. I'll be talking to someone and they'll be talking about how much they miss the person that they're no longer with, how much they long for aspects of usually the early days of the relationship when it all seemed so special, when they were full of hopes and dreams and the kind of fantasy of ideal love that both they and probably their partner got caught up in. They will be talking about that. And I'll be thinking, this person cheated on you double figures times, or this person said some things to you that are so cruel and hostile and degrading of you, or this person treated you like you were unimportant or that you were just worthless. And it's quite amazing how much our attention can turn to either one of those things. So I would say make yourself a shit list and review it, um, without allowing that to get you into a kind of resentful, angry stage, but just to put the reality of the relationship to stop that euphoric recall. And I don't also suggest think about the things that you hope for in your future, because when you're in that kind of euphoric recall, often you're thinking, my future is never going to be as good as this. The best days are over. The best love of my life is gone. The most special relationship is gone. Think about the things that you want for your future in many aspects of your life, for your career, for the friendships that you have, for your family, both your close family, your extended family, the hobbies, the interests you have, the things that you want to pursue, and, begin to refocus your attention and your energy on that. And the other thing I'd suggest is, because you're probably ruminating, right? When you're ruminating, you're sitting there and you're going over and over and over the same things again and again and again. And that can be very enticing and it can take up a huge amount of time. You might want to keep some boundaries around that. What I often suggest to people is you set yourself a time limited period in which you are going to ruminate or think about your ex. And that is the only time. And the rest of the time, when you find yourself having those thoughts, you say to yourself, I'm saving that for my rumination time. And right now, I'm going to focus my attention on something that's important, and that something that's important can be making yourself a very nice dinner, or taking a really lovely walk, or going for a swim, or catching up with a friend, or whatever it is for you, but refocus your attention elsewhere. Let me know if that makes sense and if that's helpful. So, the masterminds, can you be the golden child and the scapegoat at the same time, or any of those terms together? Like, you have to be the best at everything to be loved, but everything is still your fault. Yeah, makes sense. Yes, yes. What was your experience? Is that something that happened to you? Were you at times idealized and put on a pedestal and you're the perfect good little boy or girl? And then at other times, everything that goes wrong is your fault because you screwed up, and you can flip between those things. Absolutely. That's very possible. In schema therapy, I think a lot about people having different modes, different coping modes. And that may reflect another person in the family's coping mode. What they create in you through their mode. So they may at times be in the I am the perfect mother mode or the perfect father mode, and I have this perfect family. It's almost like a grandiose mode, right? I'm grandiose. I have a perfect family. We're so picture perfect. We're so wonderful. We're so amazing. We're so happy. We're so golden. And when you're in that situation, no one can be quite as good as you. But then at other times, they might be in a much more angry, defensive mode, in which case everything is your fault. So yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. And I think it's also possible to flip between those at different times and different stages of life, just depending on kind of what's going on within a family. So yeah, I think it's very possible to put a child in multiple roles at different times of the day, different weeks, different months, different years. And I think it's probably what I would want to know much more about, or what might be helpful for you to reflect on, is what were the roles that you were put in at different times and different stages? How did you play them? And how do you continue to play those roles now? And what role would you like to play now? Would you like to have a little rebellion against some of these roles that you've been pushed to take? And how can you find a much more healthier, more grown-up version of you if these kind of more childlike roles come up in your relationships, either with your family of origin or in your relationships now? So yeah. So another good question. Do you believe having a narcissist collapse is a thing? And can you be in it for years? Would you say someone with NPD that is in a collapse state would appear more covert presenting? I don't tend to think about collapse, or narcissistic collapse as an entity in itself, but I certainly think, if you have very strong narcissistic defenses and you make yourself into a worthwhile person by being very, very special, and then your specialness is threatened in some way. So you have a lot of loss. Maybe you have issues at work. Maybe you lose a lot of status, or you lose money, or someone loses love if their narcissism plays out in their love relationships and they have the fantasy of ideal love or power or success. When you lose those things, for someone who is highly narcissistic, I think they have very little tolerance. Their self-esteem is very unstable, so they can very quickly turn into quite severe depression, even suicidality, because they don't have the stable, secure sense of self that can cope with losses, that can cope with defeat, that can cope with failure. And we're all human. We're going to go through life. We're going to experience hardship at times. We're going to experience failures. We're going to experience loss in our life. Things will not always go our way. And someone with healthy enough self-esteem is able to cope with that, is able to manage it. Doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean they won't maybe feel depression or have difficulties with anxiety if they're facing severe stressors. But for someone who's highly narcissistic, you remove the coping strategy that they have, which is the specialness and the achievement and the grandiosity, and then they're going to be, I am just such a terrible failure, I'm nothing, I'm nobody. And yes, I think in that situation, you may well find that someone is going to be more covert presenting, in the sense that they don't have the narcissistic grandiosity as a defense to help them cope with their underlying sense of being nothing and a nobody. Let me know if that answers your question. And if you're in the chat and you have a perspective on this, do share it, because I think it's really helpful. Share it if you've experienced it yourself, or if you've seen it in other people. Let me know what you think. The chemistry. Oh, yeah. And it's the chemistry that you end up thinking about, isn't it? When you're in the idealized state. So if you've just joined, Invisible Borderline asked a question about how do you deal with the kind of magical thinking and the euphoric recall of past relationships. And when you have that very, very strong chemistry, it's super exciting. It feels amazing. It's probably pretty short-lived, let's be honest, or it comes in waves. You have those big peaks and the big troughs. You have that real roller coaster ride of a relationship. And then when you're in the loss of that relationship and you're grieving the end of the relationship, you think you're losing your partner, you think you're breaking up or you have broken up, you will recall the highs, but you don't recall the lows. So let me know, are you gonna take my suggestion of a ship list? So mastermind. And if you could speak or explain what masking and narcissistic collapse and masking, still learning the terminology. These are not dumb questions. And, one of the issues I think you're probably dealing with is that a lot of these terms aren't necessarily from a kind of consistent literature. There aren't agreed upon definitions of these things. A lot of them come from kind of how people are interpreting them and putting it on the internet. So I think, I go listen to some content on the internet about narcissism, and I'm like, wow, this is different. This is not what I studied. Um, so I think that's a problem. I think there is a sort of idea with masking that someone who's a narcissist puts on a mask and they put on the shiny, glitzy, amazing mask that they're going to show to the world. And underneath they're a deep, toxic, evil, nasty person. And then the pleasant mask comes off and you see the reality and I don't see it like that. I actually see all of those things as different masks that someone puts on. So yeah, someone who's highly narcissistic might have that mask of I'm amazing, I'm superior, I'm powerful, I'm the perfect lover, I'm the hero in the story. And they can present with that, and that can be very appealing, it can be very attractive. But often psychologically, it's a way to cope with not feeling good about yourself, feeling very insecure, feeling like you're nobody, and that without the grandiosity, you're worthless. Okay. And you have that big swings between the two. Now, then what you will also see that is when someone is threatened, their grandiosity is threatened, you may see what I would see as a different mask. It's a different defense. You may see a much more prickly, angry, aggressive, antagonistic version of someone who's very, very defensive and angry. And often that's also a means of protecting self-esteem. It's not accepting defeat or failure. Maybe it's blaming everyone else for it. That's also a mask. As also a coping mode. It's also an overcompensatory strategy for underlying really very low, poor self-esteem and a poor sense of themselves, and just an inability to tolerate the ordinary ups and downs of life. So that's another mask. It's another version of the person. And narcissistic collapse, I think, is I think is more when the defenses have failed and the person is really in the pits of despair. And for someone who's highly narcissistic, I think that can often present as severe depression and suicidality, but it's extremely, extremely distressing for them because they don't have the defenses and the coping strategies that they've been using to kind of navigate their way through the world. So yeah. I hope that makes sense. Invisible Borderline, check out. Yes, do check out Invisible Borderline. So Dr. Ruth, what about doing a role play to show us a schema therapy session? I need a volunteer. So I wouldn't film patient. I wouldn't feel good about doing that. I know there are people who do that. I really admire them. So Esther Perel does that, but they're one-off sessions. I'll bear that in mind. Can I give you a sneak peek into schema therapy? I'll have a think if there's a creative way to do that. So how does what factor in with BPD? So fantasy defenses. Do you mean like this sort of fantasy? We all have fantasies, right? We all daydream. We all have things that we'd like. We'll maybe fantasize about things like, oh, if you know, I'm in the cold and wet in the UK at the moment. I'm constantly fantasizing about sun. Um, so, we all do that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's when the fantasies are no longer fantasies and you're starting to really get so caught up in them, they're preoccupying and they're stopping you from being able to live life in a state of reality. So if you have a fantasy of ideal love, which is actually something that some people with borderline personality disorder also have, along with people who have narcissistic personality disorder, is the fantasy relationship is going to be the perfect relationship that's going to rescue them. It's going to be so amazing. You're going to feel special and loved, and this person's never going to let you down. That's and that can often be a way of not feeling sad, vulnerable, alone, abandoned, and that kind of thing. So, both people with narcissistic and borderline personality disorders can have quite extreme fantasies. But I think all of us have those kind of fantasies at times, you know. So you have to be in the top 1% to not be ignored. But I think my mother reminds her of her parents. I'm not sure what the second comment means, but yeah. Oh, I see. I think I reminded of her parents' hatred. Yeah, absolutely. It's what I think is really horrible is that, you often find these things repeat generation after generation. So when you have kind of, you know, parents, you become a parent, you've experienced a great deal of hatred from your own parents. Sometimes you're really wanting to do different with your own kids and you want them to be perfect to prove that you're a good parent. Um, and then if the kid's imperfect, because kids are imperfect and sometimes they're little assholes, then you take it out on the child, and that's dreadful, and that it is coming from the parents' own trauma and their own history. But obviously, the effect on the child who's just being an ordinary, wonderful, imperfect little child is really devastating. And it is that demand for perfection. And if you are hitting the demand for perfection, if you're in that top 1% and you're doing me proud, then I'm proud and you're perfect and you're proving me to be a good person and a good parent. But then if you fail, it's your fault. And I think that's really sad because I think, what I often will sort of think is as a parent, our job is to just love our children as they are and to support them and to be with them, whatever's going on. And when they're doing well, you cheer and you applaud them and you support them and you celebrate them. And when they're struggling, your love doesn't change. You're still there with them. You're still supporting them. You're still applauding their effort. You're still encouraging them. And maybe you're giving them a little extra support and care if they need it. So, is it true that you mean narcissists? I don't tend to use the word narc. It tends to be a slur. Put themselves before their children. Is it narcissistic to give your child an item you owned previously after you bought a new, better item? I don't think so. I mean, um, you know, my kid has my old iPad, and she's not getting the new one. um, I think narcissists as parents is a whole area in itself because the very same challenges that play out in every other of life can play out in parenting. And so someone who's highly narcissistic in their parenting may well have a demand on themselves that I'm going to be the perfect mother or the perfect father, and I'm going to do everything right, and I'm going to have these impossibly high standards that nobody can meet because nobody can meet them. And then also seeing the child as a reflection, completely as a reflection of you. I have been the perfect mother or father, therefore you must be the perfect child. And if you're not, then I'm going to completely degrade and devalue you. So that's a kind of strategy that you see within kind of narcissistic parent. But no, I don't think it's narcissistic to give your child an item you've previously owned. Not in itself. I'm just scrolling. Comment. Can BPD be diagnosed after a 15-year marriage? So BPD can be diagnosed at any time in adult life, but there has to be a history, okay? And the history has to go right back to childhood. So you don't develop a personality disorder as an adult. It's been there your whole life. But yeah, you could certainly see the manifestations of it after a long relationship. And you can't diagnose your partner. That's the only thing I would say. Diagnosing a personality disorder is the end stage of a long mental health assessment. It isn't something you can diagnose in someone who you're in a difficult relationship with. I guess it's probably more interesting for me when I'm doing couples therapy is to understand what your experiences have been of your partner and what their experiences have been with you and how that's playing out in your relationship. And also, how does that reflect both of your other relationships and how you are generally? You've always said your animal totem is a porcupine. I love it. Porcupines are kind of cute. I like the porcupine and sing. Have you seen that movie? My kid loves it, so we've watched it a lot. I like the porcupine. So, Rayanne, the narrative says narcs are manipulative because they change their behavior according to the person they're facing. That's not, we all change our behavior. Are you the same at home as you are in work? Are you the same with your colleagues when it's just you and your colleagues as when your boss walks in the room? We all change our behavior according to circumstances. I think with people who are pathologically narcissistic, what can often happen is the person close to them is the person they actually care most about. It's the one whose opinion they want, the one they want to think well of. Particularly if their narcissism plays out in their relationships and they have a lot of fantasies of ideal love. And so actually the person who's close will often see the much more angry and defensive modes because they have the capacity to trigger the narcissistic person's vulnerability, because it's easy to be the show off and the grandiose one at work because no one's getting really close. No one's necessarily seeing your weakness or your vulnerability. But if you live with someone, then you're going to see their weaknesses, you're going to see their vulnerabilities, and they know it. And so when that feels exposing and the person who's narcissistic feels devalued or criticized, or those ordinary relational conflicts get blown up into you're assaulting me, you're insulting me, therefore I'm going to turn it right back on you. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not nice behavior, to be clear. It's not nice behavior, but that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that it's deliberately manipulative. So, fantasy defenses, dissociation, the honeymoon was surreal and crashed quickly. Yeah. And I'm guessing your euphoric recall is of that honeymoon period. So that makes sense. Anger is sometimes a mask to show they haven't gotten to me. Another is I mask what I really think and feel about people. Yeah. Yeah. So that's okay. So it's a term that so many people use, narc. But I think a lot of people would see it as a slur. I don't know. You guys let me know, is narc a slur? Because I think it is not a term I use. But I don't know. But then again, you know what? People use the term narcissist as a slur. Whereas I would use it to maybe describe someone who's highly, highly pathologically narcissistic or has narcissistic personality disorder. But I don't mean it as a slur. It's just a descriptor. Let me know. What do you guys think? Could you talk about age regression mechanisms? I'm not sure what you mean, but I'll talk anyway. Let me know. So, I think all of us, we trigger enough, and we will sometimes adopt the defense mechanisms and the coping strategies we used as children. Push my buttons enough, and you will see this part of me that's very rebellious. The part of me that will say, I grew up in an environment where I was told what I had to think and what I had to do, and the rules were very clear. And for me, a big part of growing up and my task of growing up in my kind of adolescence and into early adulthood was I had to become independent. I had to have a bit of a rebel to go out and explore and do my own thing. That mechanism has persisted to this day. Trigger me enough, and I will be extremely independent. I will be completely autonomous, and I will argue with you every single point you ever make. Not only that, I will do it with the utmost of sarcasm. I will be very, very funny, and I won't care about your feelings because it's more important to be right. Now, that's my coping mode. This is my age regression, but we all do that. And if, it's kind of interesting to think about in our closest relationships, what triggers us into the ways that we coped when we were younger, and what are the things that maybe you're most vulnerable to. Are you more vulnerable to feeling abandoned, to feeling alone, or to feeling smothered and kind of entrapped or enmeshed? That would be really interesting to think about. So burly Irish man. It's fascinating, but painful at the same time. Looking at my behaviors and seeing so many, and I'm assuming you mean narcissist tendencies, and some bipolar behaviors developed after my second marriage to an addictions counselor. What I'd suggest is if you are able to, go and get some therapy and tease it apart and see how you can kind of come to understand yourself with empathy and compassion, which doesn't mean justifying yourself, means saying, okay, what are the ways in which sometimes I'm an asshole? We all are, right? Including me. And, give yourself the chance to kind of see how did those things develop. And, there are relationships that are just not good relationships for us to be in. And they can bring out tendencies in us that will never come out in another relationship. So that's also really interesting. What was it that drew you to this person? What about this relationship brought those things out in you? And what are other relationships that have maybe brought other aspects out in you that are much more positive and all the rest of it, does that make sense? Yeah, almost everyone can have some addictive behavior. Let me know what you mean. Tracks. Wow. So, an invisible borderline. Most people use narc as a slur, definitely in my experience. I used to do it too. My perspective has changed. I use NPD or traits when speaking now. Yeah, that's the same. I find most people use narc as a slur, but I do think some people use it as an abbreviation. So I don't know. I don't use it. I know Mark Aitchin says if you use narc in his comments, he will delete them. He's like, yeah. You guys let me know. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or what should we say? And what are you guys doing for Christmas? What are you doing? Because normally I do lives on a Sunday evening, but I'm not because it's Christmas Eve. So I'm going to be, my partner and I tend to sit up late on Christmas Eve, watching Christmas movies and wrapping presents for our now 6-year-old. So that is what I will be doing this time tomorrow. But yeah, let me know what you guys are up to. Yeah. Like we all do it, right? You want to know what your partner was like as a kid? Just take them home for a week. You're going to see. But we all do it. It's amazing, isn't it? That I think we can all end up reverting to younger versions of ourselves at different times. Are there any more questions or comments, or should I think about wrapping up for this evening? So I'm back. I had a close relative tried to give me a birthday gift while walking to the graveyard during an elderly relative's funeral. I found the behavior inappropriate, confusing, and also almost desperate. What do you? What about it was confusing, or it sounds like it was very uncomfortable. And I think with all of these situations, it's kind of context, you know, context needed. Um, you have so many. Wait till the next live. You don't have to wait till the next live at all. There's like 18 people here because I can see, and there's only a couple of you speaking. That's what they're nothing. You have no plans for the holiday at all. You know, that can be a nice thing. That can be a nice thing too, to kind of relax. But yeah, it's fun. I like being here. I like chatting to you guys. It's a nice thing to do. Mark Aitchison is facing so much hate with his. I know, and his content's so good. His really, really good. I recommend his content to people all the time. But I know his comment section can be, yeah, quite a dumpster fire. The mastermind, you can talk next time. You can talk next time. Thank you for being here, even though you're at work. Yeah. So you guys, it has been a complete pleasure as always. I'm gonna be here again next Saturday. Normally I do Sundays, but I'm gonna do Saturday next week as well, because the next day is New Year's Eve, and I have some friends coming around to celebrate. My friend's birthday is on New Year's Eve, so we're gonna celebrate her birthday and let our kids. They have a kid who's similar age to my kid. We're gonna let them do what they do, and we're gonna have some grown-up time on the New Year's Eve. But I will see you guys next Saturday, 9 p.m. And you guys have an amazing Christmas. If you are celebrating Christmas, have an amazing relaxing time. If not, and 100% agree with invisible borderline. People with MPD are still people and often in a lot of pain. I absolutely agree with that. I think we are all people at the end of the day. So Merry Christmas, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.